Ladies and gentlemen, now at the Warriors Corner, Major General Stewart, Major General Harrison, Brigadier General Costello, and Brigadier General Holy.
Now you might be able to hear me. Okay, wonderful. Hey, Will, first off, it's great to be here at AUSA. I am Major General Dave Stewart. I am the director of the Joint Counter Uncrewed or Unmanned Aircraft Systems Office. Okay, so Counter UAS Office, JCO, and the joint is important. Second hat I have is the director of what is DAMO fires, so all things integrated air missile defense, as well as long-range precision fires. I'm joined today by our AAMDC commanders, both active duty and National Guard, as well as Command Sergeant Major Rowley, who represent. So how this will work, I'm going to have a few opening comments, and then I'm going to pass to each one of our esteemed leaders here to hear their perspective on counter UAS from their specific AOR in the combatant commanders that they support, and in some cases, service retained for the Army. So first off, counter UAS. I would offer, let's see if we have our first chart, please. So here are some of the thoughts, right? First off, this problem set is not going anywhere anytime soon. But lots of strategic choices, lots of realities that we are faced with. Number one, up front, I would tell you that the department is moving towards a counter UXS. So that's air, sea, and land, not just the air part. So when we wrap our arms around that as a department, we're really seeing that this uncrewed, unmanned threat is coming from all different areas. But right now, from the JCO perspective, I challenge my team to really focus on the here and now, support to the services and the combatant commands, but with an eye toward what is that next shiny object. And so we have to stay ahead of the threat, which is evolving every day. And then you can look at this. The J in JCO is joint. And so we try to throw a lot of things up here. I would tell you the Navy right now is looking from a service perspective, afloat versus ashore, right? And you could argue that this threat is going to challenge both of those domains. Then kinetic, non-kinetic, how are you going to get after this problem set? And I would tell you we've got a lot of senior leaders that understand it's a layered effect, layered defense, and no one silver bullet is going to solve this problem. And then another big issue that we talk about is materiel versus non-materiel. We get really excited about that M, the materiel. I would offer a lot more involved when it comes to doctrine, training, organization. So we have to really go down the DOTML PF. Okay. And then that last one down on the end, as this problem set comes to the homeland, which we've got the 263rd represented here with Rich Holy, you're going to really find that policy and authorities is something that's going to challenge all nations. So next slide, please. So this is how I try to frame the problem. You can see the breadth of the threat, groups 1 through 5 along the top. On the left-hand side, you have protection tasks. Tasks that I would argue everyone is responsible for, right? At different echelons, you are going to have to protect yourself. And you can see the wide range of effectors that we have, both kinetic and non-kinetic. And then on the right side, you've got the air defense mission. I'd argue a mission that is seated with a commander in support of a JTF commander, a combatant commander, and really aligns with a mission set. So you are part of a planned mission. And then in the middle is that group 3, the most challenging, really dangerous. I would argue too, I got to tell you, swarm and mass attack, they're right on the heels. I might have those neck and neck right now, but the group 3 remains one of the most challenging threats we have in terms of the capabilities and then the payload that you're talking about, as well as the reach. So again, you're seeing the joint spectrum of all threats. You're seeing how each service is really getting after that, and that's part of what the JCO does, is work with services to understand what they are pursuing, maybe some of the stuff that's right off the shelf for them that might exist, or we go out and do demonstrations to prove a capability and then follow through and try and encourage services to pursue that capability. So with that, I am going to pause and turn it over to Rich Harrison, the 32nd Army Air and Missile Defense Commander, who is aligned to CENTCOM, but service retained with FORCECOM. So Rich, over to you.
Thanks, Dave. Hey, I'm from the South, so I'm going to stick to the script because I don't know who's taping or recording out there. And my mama said, you stick to the script, you can't go wrong, son. So I'm going to stick to the script today. Look forward to your questions here at the end. Good morning, distinguished guests, colleagues, and partners. Thank you for our opportunity to speak to this important symposium focused on the ever-evolving threat posed by enemy unmanned aerial systems. As Dave said, I'm Major General Richard Harrison, the Commanding General for 32nd Army Air and Missile Defense Command, stationed at Fort Bliss, Texas. Our AAMDC faces a lot of counter-UAS challenges. It's evolving, too. The unmanned aerial systems that we face in the CENTCOM AOR really challenge us a great deal, and we think there are some solutions that I'll share at the very end, how you can help us get after those challenges. As you're all aware, the UAS threat environment is rapidly evolving, and the ability to keep pace with our adversaries who are increasingly relying on these systems present a major challenge for all of us. Let's start by looking at the nature and threat that we face. Unmanned aerial systems, ranging from small quadcopters to large unmanned combat aerial vehicles, have fundamentally changed the dynamics of warfare. Our adversaries span across a multitude of platforms and encompass a 360-degree threat. Combined with both states and non-state actors are leveraging the UAS for intelligence gathering, surveillance, and target acquisition, and even direct kinetic attacks. These systems can be deployed in swarms, are difficult to detect, and present a challenge to the traditional air and missile defense systems. As a AAMDC, we must evolve our tactics, techniques, and procedures to stay ahead of that threat. However, there are significant challenges we face in addressing this threat. The first challenge. One of the most pressing challenges we face is the detecting and targeting unmanned aerial systems, particularly small radar cross-section and low-flying drones. Current radar systems are designed to track large and fast-moving targets, such as missiles, aircraft, and large UAS, within groups 3 through 5. The small size of these UAS often allows them to evade sensors and blend into the clutter of the battle space, making detection even more difficult. Sensor systems that can detect, track, and classify UAS with high fidelity, especially in cluttered environments, are extremely critical for the fight that we face today. Additionally, as we significantly our capability gaps in our ability to disrupt and disable UAS, electronic warfare plays a critical key role in countering these systems. As many as UAS are reliant on GPS and radio communication frequencies for navigation and control. However, these EW capabilities are not fully integrated in a comprehensive counter-UAS system. Additionally, adversaries are becoming more sophisticated, using hardened communication links and autonomous navigation to reduce their vulnerability to jamming. In the realm of cyber capabilities, many UAS are susceptible to cyber exploitation, such as taking control of a UAS or feeding it false data. While this represents an opportunity, we currently lack the robust, integrated cyber tools needed to execute these tactics at scale, and most reside at a higher classification. This is an area we could use some development and greater integration between our cyber force and the Air and Missile Defense Force. While the Patriot system poses a capability to neutralize large, fast-moving aerial threats, it's not suggested to proportional response to a UAS, especially a small drone. We need more tailored kinetic responses, such as directed energy, or more cost-effective, more flexible interceptors to counter small and slow-moving UAS. A layered defense system is essential, combine both kinetic and non-kinetic responses. However, integrating these capabilities across different domains, such as land, air, and cyber, remains a challenge for us. Legal and policy limitations on when UAS can be engaged continue to pose challenges for us, especially in compact urban environments. We also face hurdles in training and doctrine for countering UAS. Our current air and missile defense training primarily focuses on traditional threats, aircraft, missiles, and rockets. While these remain important, we must also shift focus to include UAS in our training programs at all levels of command. In addition, doctrine must continually evolve to reflect the changing threat environment. New tactics, techniques, and procedures must be deliberately refined and tailored to counter UAS and ensure that our air defense forces are fully prepared for this dynamic domain of warfare. In regard to regional response, if we see collectively in that example of countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE are enhancing their air defense systems, including the deployment of counter-UAS technologies such as radars and directed energy weapons across their respective AOs. CENTCOM continues to lead the charge in working with regional partners to improve their counter-UAS capabilities through training and technology, sharing with our allies have displayed a significant appetite to investing in layered counter-UAS, combined kinetic and non-kinetic. The way we see this as an AMDC is in 3 points. Point number 1, Army critical assets have a way to detect, track, identify, and neutralize a small UAS threat. Number 2, Army organizations at echelon have trained and designated personnel to address this small UAS threat. And 3, joint interoperability and data sharing with our partner nations. I'll pause now and hand it off to Rich Worley.
Hey, well, thanks, General Stewart, for this opportunity. Really honored to be here with my esteemed colleagues up here on this front row. I would like to publicly kind of thank Dave Stewart and his team. Think about all the work they've done on the joint counter-UAS fight, right? You guys have really set and led the charge, and we appreciate you doing that. So from my foxhole, I want to talk a little bit today about counter-unmanned aerial systems, the challenges and opportunities with a particular focus on information sharing across government agencies and then regulatory challenges. Drones or unmanned aerial systems pose a significant security challenge. And oh, by the way, I'm from the South too, so. You know, they're cheap, they're readily available, and their small size makes it extremely difficult to detect and track. Right? In the wrong hands, they can be used nefariously for surveillance, espionage, smuggling, and even as weapons. You know, we've seen where drones have disrupted air traffic, where they've breached secure facilities, and even carried out large-scale attacks, none of which is a surprise to anybody in the audience today. Now, let's not overlook the opportunity that counter-UAS technologies present. So with every challenge, gives us an opportunity to innovate and improve. And here's a few examples. So advancement in detection and tracking. You know, the need to counter drones has driven remarkable advancements in radar, RF detection, and EOIR technologies. Now, these systems can detect even the smallest UAS and enhancing our overall domain awareness. On the kinetics and non-kinetics, the joint unified with our industry partners is creating, developing a range of countermeasures from jamming, which is just jamming the signals of our drones, to net guns and lasers that can physically disable them. Yeah. Each has its role depending on the scenario. As we think about these capabilities, we have to think differently about what's appropriate for defense of the homeland and what might be the impacts of our civilian infrastructure. Right? Think about detection and denial capabilities make a lot of sense in the homeland, but on the kinetic front is going to require both what's in current use and what's in development will require some additional analysis. And on integration and automation, counter-UAS systems can be integrated into our existing air defense networks, providing a multi-layered defense. Automation, and better known as the sexy term AI, can help streamline responses and reduce the burden on our personnel. Right, to fully leverage these opportunities, we need effective information sharing across multiple government agencies, and here's why. So shared situational awareness. Real-time information sharing can provide a comprehensive picture of the airspace, enable us to track drones and respond to threats more effectively and timely. Coordinated response. By sharing information, we can coordinate response across agencies, preventing replication of efforts and ensuring the most appropriate action is taken. And then data analysis. Pooling this data allows a better analysis and identification of potential trends, helping us anticipate and mitigate future threats. However, we're currently facing regulatory challenges that hinder this information sharing, i.e. privacy concerns. Laws designated to protect privacy can sometimes impede sharing of critical information. Finding the right balance between protecting privacy and ensuring security is paramount. Jurisdictional issues. Different agencies have different jurisdictions and authorities. Navigating these can be complex and time-consuming. We need clear guidelines and potential new legislation to facilitate information sharing. And then finally, technological barriers. Not all agencies use compatible systems. Investing in interoperable technologies can help break down these barriers. So to overcome these challenges, work is ongoing with policymakers, industry partners, and stakeholders. Teams are advocating for regulatory reform, investing in compatible technologies, and fostering a culture of collaboration and shared responsibility. So in conclusion, while drones present real challenges, they also offer us an opportunity to innovate, adapt, and ultimately enhance our homeland security. Effective information sharing is key. It's not just about technology, it's about partnerships, it's about policies, it's about people. Thank you for the time. Look forward to the discussion.
Really well said, Rich. And I just want to remind everybody that we will not go this alone, whether as an Army or as the active force or the National Guard. This problem set is going to cross the full spectrum, and so the National Guard being a part of that is really important. And I'd also offer, I'm pushing for a whole of nation approach, not just a whole of government when we're talking about other interagency partners. This really is going to have to be academia. You're going to have the government involved, and then on down the line with industry as well. Okay, next we've got, so I appreciate 263rd and you and Frank Rice in your leadership. Next off to the Pacific, the 94th WMDC with General Pat Costello.
Hey, thanks, sir, and thanks for this opportunity to both you and to AUSA. I'm going to be brief for two reasons. Number one, I just flew in from Hawaii, and I have no clue what time of day it is. And number two, I share a lot of the same challenges that both General Holy and General Harrison and General Stewart have laid out, and Sergeant Major is going to talk about. So I want to talk about a little bit on the threat and why this is a challenge in the Pacific and what we are challenged with and what opportunities are out there. I think, number one, this is a threat that is not limited to conflict, right? So this is a peacetime threat and a conflict-based threat. You don't have to be in war to have a UAS problem. And that shapes a lot of the ways that we look at this. Talking about the PRC, just as they are watching conflicts around the world, we are watching conflicts around the world. And the PLA continues to expand its arsenal of UAS, developing extended range capabilities, which threaten all the way out to the second island chain. And knowing the Pacific's geography, which I'll talk about here in a second, that's quite an expanse. The PLA's aviation force is rapidly fielding technologically advanced and domestically built range of UAS platforms. Not limited to the PLA and the People's Liberation Air Force, but the Navy continues to expand its area of maritime operations through the use of UAS, and a key component of their strategy. So as we look at this, China's ability to extend influence well past the second island chain puts just about everybody in the Pacific at risk. DPRK, which nobody is surprised at, is investing significant resources into improving its UAS capabilities with the regime's goal of achieving strategic deterrence. Primarily fielding groups 1 through 3, North Korea recently unveiled a reconnaissance and multi-role UAV that employ a reverse-engineered copy of a Hellfire missile similar to an RQ-4 and MQ-9. And so as we watch the relationships that are building in all the conflicts around the world, that's one that we're watching very closely. Our challenges are widespread, but number one, I think first and foremost, the lack of contiguous landmass in the Pacific makes this a joint problem that we all have to embrace and a multinational problem. But we are also challenged by the fact that we do not have multinational agreements to kind of fall back on, like our counterparts over in Germany, to some extent in GCC, and then hopefully to some extent the interagency. But that challenges us a lot, right? Working in Korea is not the same as working in Japan. And then sporadic presence in other countries around the Indo-Pacific are not the same. And the threats are not the same. So we have to keep that in mind. That all fits into the geopolitical environment with 100 square miles of diverse geography and geographically a maritime AOR but as I said, the joint force, all of the joint force has a role. This inhibits our ability to adequately and bilaterally, and in some cases multilaterally, command and control, provide command and control, and ensure that interoperability is there. General Stewart and General Gainey before him have done the Lord's work on trying to ensure interoperability across the joint services. But as we're working with partners and allies, indigenously based systems may or may not be inherently interoperable with U.S. systems, and we've got to find a way around that. And then as technology evolves, the systems must be able to quickly adapt to adversarial efforts to develop and employ counter-UAS countermeasures, whether that's through hardening, swarm, or anything above. But the machine learning aspect of this is extremely important as we do this, because we do not have the time to take a Patriot kind of mindset on this, where you get a threat database update every couple of years. But the UAS problem set evolves so quickly that if we do not involve some element of machine learning and real-time database updating when a new TTP is discovered, we're going to have a problem. We're always going to be shooting behind the duck. Talk a little bit about opportunities here. Obviously, all the gentlemen before me talked about strategy, doctrine, and policy for both U.S. and partner nations in prioritizing these capabilities to develop and refine supporting the force structure. We're working hard with industry partners to do this on a daily basis, really led by the efforts of the JCO. And then with the efforts that DoD has already put together, making sure that our soldiers and operators and control mechanisms and those people that man those control mechanisms are trained. And as we look to do this, decentralized C2 across the Pacific is extremely important, because if we do not make decisions in timely, relevant timelines, we're going to have a problem. And so there's a great partnership right now between the Air Force and the Army to find that overlap between multi-domain operations and agile combat employment to ensure that control mechanisms and facilities are in the right place at the right time. So with that, let me pause and hand it over to Command Sergeant Major Rowley, and I look forward to any questions. Thank you.
And just before Sergeant Major goes, so Pat, I really appreciate you foot stomping, because I mentioned joint, but combined is really important in all of our areas of responsibility. And so as I look out across AUSA, there are a lot of partners, a lot of allies here, and so it's a really important point. I really appreciate you making it. Okay, Command Sergeant Major Rowley, over to you, representing the 10th AAMDC and General King.
Sir, thanks very much for the opportunity. As General Stewart said, I'm from 10th Army Air Missile Defense Command, representing General King, who had some important business elsewhere. The first thing I have to do whenever talking about 10th AAMDC is remind everybody that it's not just Europe that we're responsible for, it's Africa as well. And I can assure you the threat is as present and pervasive in Africa as it is in Europe. To that point, we've observed or learned several lessons working with the Marine TAOC. They get very upset if you call it a TAOC, but working with the Marine TAOC in the littoral space, and how do we integrate base defense operations in a larger air defense cluster. As far as IAMD on the eastern flank, everyone's familiar that we have ongoing operations in Poland, Romania, as well Turkey. That's provided us an environment where we are constantly able to observe and assess lessons from the operations going on in Ukraine from Russia, as well as picking up new doctrinal concepts, integrating multiple systems in base defense clusters with the layered capabilities that the other generals here have highlighted. Moving into some challenges, I think once again everybody's familiar with the diversity and proliferation of threats coming out of Russia. They're able to cheaply produce these systems and are leveraging their technology and those cheap methods of production to thwart protection measures. I think probably our single biggest challenge is operating inside of NATO. There are 32 member nations in NATO, and our adversaries are exploiting gaps to NATO policy. Group 1 UAS are able to operate below the threshold, and it's a challenging bit for us. Under peacetime conditions and authorities for soldiers to recognize when they should or can engage UAS, given those restrictive peacetime rules of engagement. Moving into our opportunities, Europe has a very extensive exercise program where we see not only joint Air Force participation, but all of those NATO partners that I earlier referenced. That's given us a pretty fertile ground for us to define authorities, responsibilities, and capabilities at echelon, from the theater all the way down to tactical elements, battalion, company level. This is probably the number one thing that I talk about when I'm traveling through the theater and down into units, is the importance of passive air defense measures. If there's one thing that we've learned from the war in Ukraine, it is the importance of passive air defense and the point in the passive defense measures. TTPs, material solutions, cross-training of maneuver forces, having a systems approach. We can't just hand wave it away as we've done for 20 years on static sites. We have to be able to think a little deeper. And then probably the biggest opportunity that we have is the growth of the Corps and the Division BDOC. We see a level of interest in maneuver forces that I've never seen before in my career. We have maneuver folks who are speaking in terms of protection and air defense. They want this capability. I would argue that they need this capability, and there is a hard drive to understand it. I've spent a lot of time working with 11 Bravos infantrymen, learning how to operate these counter UAS systems, because it is a shared responsibility, as General Stewart alluded to. Kind of my last point is, if we're going to be serious about counter UAS, this is something that has to be all the way down to the squad, platoon, company level. There needs to be as much facility with counter UAS as there is with a Mark 19, an M2, or a 240 Bravo. Not just at the Corps and division level. That's got to be stuff that happens all the way down. So I appreciate the time, sir.
All right. Well, wonderful. Appreciate everybody's comments. I'm reminded that as we look across the battle space and learn from other countries and other conflicts that are going on across the world, so too are our adversaries, who are also looking and sharing their technology and their tactics, techniques, and procedures. So we have to recognize how quickly this battle space and this problem set continues to evolve. And then also I kind of noticed when you talked about 32 NATO countries, there were a couple of smirks out here of our more senior individuals who just think about how simple life was maybe 30 years ago or even 20 years ago, and now how things have changed immensely. And beyond the threat moving very quickly, the adversaries, and quite frankly, all their, VACR now, or visual aircraft recognition, that was kind of easy back in the day. Now we've got to distinguish between, we're flying a lot of the same stuff, and it's putting off some of the same signatures and putting off some of the same signals. So really difficult. But what I'd like to do now, pending any extra comments from the panel, what I'll do is I'll turn it over for questions from the group, and I think we've allotted some time for that. Yes, please. Here, we'll bring I think we have somebody with a microphone, but you're going to... Okay, we'll come to you next.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. John Harper. I'm a reporter with Defense Scoop. General, I was wondering if you could talk about the JCO Demo 6 that's coming up next year, just in terms of the plans for that, how many vendors you're going to be bringing into that.
So, John, I think the number of vendors is to be determined. We'll go through the same process that we go through to select those vendors. But what I'll tell you, it will be done in electromagnetic spectrum, a challenged environment, okay? That's going to be our focus. Our last one was on swarm and mass attack. And so for those of you, I appreciate the question, and for those of you in industry that are competing to come into one of our demonstrations, there's a lot of talk about the benefits. Well, I'd offer right out of the gates, you get access to a range. You get access to instrumentation. You get objective analysis coming back to you. So in some ways, I understand that some folks might say, gosh, it's kind of expensive. We're saving a lot of costs, a lot of government costs up front to bring your system in, set it up next to other systems, and then really find out how it performs and get that objective feedback. So thank you, John. Appreciate you. All right, ma'am. Can Can you grab that here? Yeah, that's great.
The war in Ukraine has been going on for a while, and that's been discussed quite a bit here. But I was wondering if anybody would comment on any recent lesson learned from Israel.
Okay. That's going to be a bit. I guess we're talking AORs here, so that question could have been answered differently a couple of years ago. But I'll defer to Rich.
I'll dive on this grenade here. Obviously, you saw the news recently, man, where the UAS hit a barracks or dining facility there in Israel. So we're seeing a lot of changes in tactics and techniques, procedures from an adversary. Their flight profiles now are becoming more challenging for radar systems to detect. So as I mentioned earlier, I think a better capability to detect the groups 1, 2, and 3 will be very helpful. And we're learning in terms of every time that we have an engagement or we see an actual a target, we're collecting that data. We're using data analytics and AI to determine flight patterns, and we're proliferating that across across our partners, across our U.S. forces. So we're learning from the flight patterns. But I will tell you, the biggest lesson learned is that now the enemy is changing its TTPs, and we have to adjust quickly in order to defeat that new threat now. Thank you.
And I would also offer, I think the Red Sea has taught us a lot too. It's got the attention of just about every service now. Not that it didn't before, but there's certainly a renewed focus, going back to one of my points about ashore versus afloat, and the fact that this threat is going to challenge both of those areas. Okay, we had another question. Yep, sure.
Hi, Jen Judson with Defense News. I just wanted to build off the question on the demo. You said that you're going to focus on the electromagnetic spectrum and the threats. Can you talk about how you're seeing those threats evolve in recent years? I know it's always evolving very quickly, but maybe just highlight some of the things that are particularly concerning that you're observing.
So in the same way that we're trying to put as many sensors out on the battlefield, as many effectors, and you heard the comment, any best shooter, right? Any sensor best shooter. So we want to make sure that we're putting and really proliferating out into the battlefield. So it makes a dilemma for our adversaries as we go in. We are certainly seeing, regardless of the theater, that this contested environment is really just a matter of fact. And so I think some systems we're looking for systems that are agile and can jump quickly. And then you're also talking about whether that's the homeland or overseas, whether it's RF jamming or now PNT, which is even tougher here in the United States. So these are issues that we're going to look at. So you want agility in your systems, you have more systems, and then ultimately you have to, at some point, while we preach integration, at some point you may have to have the training to fight in an autonomous or maybe an independent type environment. Okay?
If I can, just to pile on to your response to Jen, as General Stewart was talking about the benefits of industry coming out to JCO demos and things like that, everything that our adversaries are doing, regardless of theater, right, to test our defenses on a day-to-day basis, it's the same thing, right? And we're going to see how we do, and we'll leave it to the intel community to talk about whether there's formal cooperation or informal cooperation or just studying lessons learned. But that's something we're seeing on a daily basis.
Okay, we are limited in time, so we had one here. I'll come back there, and then we'll have probably time for one more.
Hi, Cal B. Secretary Defense Daily. For General Costello, the next round for the Replicator Initiative is counter UAS, and you outlined a really difficult challenge set you have. What's your ask from the Secretary of Defense for Replicator and counter UAS?
Well, having not staffed this answer with all the layers of leadership that I have to go through to get to the SecDef, we need to be able to experiment in theater on a daily basis, right? And as this effort kind of takes a deeper look into counter small UAS, we need to be able to explore all these problem sets on a daily basis, provide immediate feedback, and there's got to be some feedback mechanism to get quick improvements made into the system. I'll kind of leave it at that.
Yeah,
but that's
I'll
the
just
biggest
answer from a JCO perspective, working with the joint staff. You're really looking right now, we're in a phase where the services are validating what it is that you want to defend or protect. What is it that you think you might require as you go out and look at these different locations and you prioritize? And so I think right now it's a little too early to come out with a very specific answer for any of the theaters. I would offer right now it is largely focused on the homeland, but there are certainly other very critical assets across the worldscape that we'd be looking at. Okay, so we had one here, please.
Thank you. Jeff Shogel, Task and Purpose for General Harrison. Can you talk about any lessons learned from the Tower 22 attack earlier this year and what extra steps are being taken against UASs in the CENTCOM AOR?
Great question, sir. I'm going to use this to dribble the clock out. I got 3 minutes left. What we learned is layered defense is critical to defeating the current threat. Having multiple systems that are interoperable on the battlefield, on the FOB, have proved to be a best practice. And then having those systems, one, operational, two, fully integrated, will have given the opportunity for that threat to be defeated. I will tell you, taking it back to institution, what we're doing now is that we are decisively engaged in helping to train units prior to deployment to the CENTCOM AOR on BDOC operations, so they're better prepared to go after that threat that they're going to face. So we're backing up to institution. We're also leveraging the Joint County U.S. University at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So we're sending folks to that course to learn about how to employ systems on the battlefield prior to going into theater. So we're taking it back to home station first and giving them opportunities. We're also getting to what CENTCOM likes to call a single pane of glass. We want to get systems on the same network so that we, BDOC operators, can see the threat and can engage the threat more quickly. So tying in AI, tying in machine learning. My team, Task Force 32, they're working now with DevCom to see how can we take the threats that are out there now, how do we feed that into a system that will give our operators quicker chance to make decisions, or perhaps make decisions for them to reduce the amount of time it takes to prosecute a threat. And the last thing I say is that interoperability with our partners. Having our partners buy into systems that we can interoperate with helps to protect the entire base. We're on a lot of joint bases in the CENTCOM AOR, so having our partners having capabilities that we can all tie into will enable us to be better prepared to defeat something that could happen again like at Tower 22. But thanks for your question, sir. Appreciate it.
So let me look back to the organizers. Do we have time for one more question, two more questions, or are we good? Okay, well, thank you again for the questions. I'm sure that the panel, some of them might have to run off. I'm going to be sitting here taking questions. If you have any, please come up. And certainly if you have other questions that we can answer later on. But thank you again for your attendance and your great questions.
Thank you, gentlemen and Command Sergeant Major. Coming up next to the Warriors Corner, the Army Energy Initiatives at 1340.